In this episode of Futures Thinking podcast, we are talking with Professor Jan-Erik Baars of the University of Applied Science in Lucerne, Switzerland, and we are discussing the role of leading design in companies, reaching to his latest book, Leading Design. You are listening to the Futures Thinking podcast, where we are sharing live conversations with people of business, design, arts, culture, science and nature who are shaping our futures today. I'm your host, Agata Bisping. Jan-Erik, it's wonderful to have you today with us, and I'm so thrilled to talk with you about the role of design in companies. I would like to ask you to introduce yourself and say a few words about your job, what you are doing, but most of all, I was thrilled or really interested in the fact that you are an American-born Dutchman living in Germany and Switzerland. Can you start with that? Because this actually brings a lot of stories along.
Yeah, well, first of all, Agatha, thanks a lot for having me. It's great. So my name is indeed Jan-Erik Baars. That sounds very Dutch, and I have Dutch parents, and they happen to be moving around a lot. And I think this is a fate that a lot of people have these days. But when I was young in the early 60s, that was maybe still quite new. Not too many people moved around. So that's why I ended up being born in the United States, because my father simply was working there. He's an astronomer, a scientist. And what these scientists do, they basically follow their career, their jobs, their projects. And so that's how I came to to this wonderful world in West Virginia, of all places. Only returned once, and then moved on to the Netherlands and grew up in the north, which is a remote location, so a bit like West Virginia. And then moved on to Germany because basically my father found another job. And so ever since, I've been also living in Austria and also in the Netherlands, of course. So I turned into a kind of a person that's not really, that you cannot tie to a location. And now I've picked up a job 10 years ago, roughly, in Switzerland at the University of Lucerne, where I ran a program for design management, and now I kind of moved on slightly. I left the design faculty where this program was held, and now moved to the business faculty. So I moved from design to business, which we'll talk about definitely later. And so that basically means that you're ending up being culturally a bit of a nobody, of a hybrid. So I'm not Dutch, I'm not German, I'm definitely not American, though I was born there. So actually I'm me. That's it. So it's I'm falling between the two worlds, or three worlds.
It's strange to hear that because, for example, for me, I'm a person that was born in Poland, raised in Poland. I have Polish parents, I have Polish relatives, and my whole life is based in Polish. For me, the view that I would be having so many cultures inside me is I think of it as enriching, not, falling apart or being parts of something or being not someone, just me, if you know what I mean. So it's a funny perspective to see that someone who has witnessed the fact of living in many countries and contacting with different cultures may say that it's also difficult to handle, not to be American, not to be Dutch, not to be German. But then again, you said that you are you. So you are really strong inside you because you needed to build it up. You need to figure it out how to be yourself in all those aspects.
Yeah, maybe it's and this is an interesting topic, and it's a topic of today, isn't it? We talk about design and management, which are also two very different things with two different very cultures, if you want to say so. They have a totally different view on life, on how to go about, how to solve problems. And what I found out over the years is that it's helpful if you have a strong relation or tie to a particular culture or to a profession or to something that gives you strength. It basically it gives you a home, a place. And if you don't have that, you start to see why some people just love to be of a particular type, or why they stick to a particular thing. And that could be a culture, that can also be a tribe, it could also be an organization that you stick to. And I think if you grow up between countries, you see, or you start to understand at least that for me was kind of a topic that is actually quite something strong, to have a strong relation to something. So that I wouldn't say it's bad to have a mixed up cultural background. It gives you definitely some benefits, but it also, you miss out on something, because I live in an area where I don't belong. And actually, if I ask myself, where would I go? Where would I belong? And there's no such place. So you become a bit of a searcher in that respect.
Or a globetrotter, like a person that knows the world and can actually fit anywhere in the world perfectly. Did it at all influence the fact that you have become an educator, a person that becomes a professor or a design management person?
Yeah, it definitely did influence my choice to go into design, industrial design, because not only being between countries and moving around and not having a place in either or country, Germany or the Netherlands, and I mean they're close by, like Germany and Poland, but Germany and Netherlands are totally different from a cultural perspective. I mean the people, though they maybe share strong language ties, culturally they're totally different. I mean the Dutch are very, very different from the Germans. So I ended up also, in terms of profession, I ended up in a similar situation. I was very drawn into physics because my father, he's a scientist, and I loved physics. And, actually was thinking of pursuing something in that area. There's something rational, something, academic maybe even, using your brains, and at the same time, I was very much into drawing and into arts. My mother is an artist, and I was always drawing these comic strips and building and constructing stuff. So I didn't know really where to go. I was also between two worlds. And then somehow, in the early 80s, via my mother who met somebody, I discovered that there's something called like industrial design, which already sounds like an oxymoron, like design and arts, which I thought was design then. Later on I found out that design is something slightly different. And then there was industrial, which sounds like engineering and rational thinking. And I thought like, oh, this is interesting. This is sounds like a tension, something that I became familiar to and started to love. So I went into industrial design. And indeed, I discovered that it is something that tries to marry these two worlds of creativity and engineering on the other side. So something that is quite free and is looking for exploration and new stuff. And on the other side, stability and control, which is what you need if you engineer a device or a product. And I found that fascinating. So I joined Philips in 1990. And their design department in the Netherlands. So I moved back to the Netherlands and and started up my career. And then a couple of years later already, due some activities happened in Philips, I moved on into design management. And only later I discovered my passion also for education and also then basically said I should do that more, but I stepped out of the industry after 22 years working in large corporations. I said, let's do something different. So I quit it and my job and picked up an education job in Lucerne and also started my consulting activity, which I'm doing since then. So I think it's a typical way what a lot of people do, work a lot and then, reflect on that and then say, oh, I need to do something else. And then you step into sort of a second career, which I did when moving into education and academia.
You have published a book in 2019, Leading Design, that was first published in German, and now it has been published in English. And in your book, Leading Design, you underline the role of design as a core competency that must be developed through a company. Why do you think so?
Well, it basically came through, it's a reflection on my experiences that I went through when working at Philips, because I developed a career over almost 20 years, and alongside that developed my personal development, I also saw design develop in Philips. Coming from an area or from a positioning where design was very much recognized already in the 80s and 90s at Philips, but still pretty much treated as something that is done, let's say, in a process later on, more downstream in the process. And in the 90s, also more and more activities were done more upstream, more explorative work. Stefano Mazzana, our boss then, was very much also focused on that, empowering the organization and using design to create futures, opportunities for futures, and also to use design in that respect. And then, and that is maybe a bit my academic part in me, that I started to figure out, okay, why is that first of all, design is generally treated as I would call it something like cosmetic, something that is done at the very end of a value chain, as opposed to using it to design and give form to the very beginning of a value chain. So that this basically, and also when I entered design management, which is an activity that's trying to create the conditions for good design in an organization. And so I was very much involved in improving processes and looking at the quality of design work, but also looking at the quality of the design process. I discovered that actually you're looking at two cultures. You have a design culture and you have a management culture in an organization. And that these two cultures are rarely really brought together in an effective way. And also if you dive deeper into that, why is that? I started to discover that managers, people, in general being responsible for running an organization, managing an organization, so related to processes, related to decision making and so forth, they have very little understanding of what design actually really does and what design really is. Vice versa, also on the design side, a lot of designers rarely do know what management really is and why it is needed.
So again, two worlds that you need to bring together, yeah?
Yes. Yeah. So I thought, okay, here I go again. So I'm again between two worlds, which are two worlds. There's the design world and the management world. So, and I'm interested to connect worlds. So that's why I said I have to look into this, and I want to bring these worlds together. So my book actually is really about that. So leading design means that you, in order to get full benefit of the potential of design, you have to create the optimal conditions for it. And that means that management has to really understand what design is. And so there is, of course, the work that designers do. I call that the design doing. So it's really what they do in order to give particular form or to determine or designate what things should be and how they should be related to an organizational activity. But the conditions in which designers optimally work, also the circumstances, the resources, and the empowerment, that's something that comes from management. So that's where I discovered also already during my Philips days that management has sometimes not the ability to set these conditions in a most optimal way. Briefings are often ill-defined. Often simply wait too long to engage with the designer, and therefore, crucial decisions are already made without considering the impact on design. And so I think it means that leadership, management, and also leadership have to really step up in their understanding of what design really is. And that's what I try to do with my book, is provide them with some insights in how to do that.
And how do you strategically position design? And why do you need to do so? You have kind of answered why do you need to do so, to get the most of the values that you can propose. But how can you convince the management, the leaders, that they should strategically position design in their companies? What are your, you are a consultant and you attend a company. You see what's going on. You see that the design is somewhere in line. Nobody's even noticing the fact that they should bring design as a topic in the company. How do you talk with the leaders, with the managers? What do you tell them? Why they need this?
I mean, if you run a company or an organization, it can also be a non-profit. It doesn't necessarily have to be a commercial, profit-oriented organization. Actually, every organization is the same in this respect, is that in order to be successful, an organization has to become meaningful and relevant to customers. Whether they are consumers or whether they are users or clients, it doesn't really matter. In order to become relevant to a customer, to basically fuel an economic cycle, so that customers will engage with the organization, will purchase the goods or will use the services, you have to have a whole system in place that enables you to create a meaningful and relevant proposition. And that's something you cannot manage. It's something you have to design. So at the core of an organization, the reason for being, the raison d'être, as we say as philosophers, is to be meaningful to customers, and that foremost is a design activity. Only if you have found out your reason for being, you start to manage. You start to create structures. You start to get resources in place, and you do all sorts of management stuff in order to bring design, which is all about being relevant and meaningful to customers, in order to bring design to a customer. So actually every CEO of an organization at its core is a designer first and then a manager. And this is something what a lot of CEOs realize, but they kind of forgot it because most of them have been educated at the business school. And I now moved to a business school 2 years ago in order to discover how they do this and why business people are so obsessed with management as opposed to being obsessed with design. And I think there's a very good reason for them being so focused on management in their role as an organizational leader, because management is all about control. This is one of the strong assets management brings to an organization. If you have good management, you have a good control over your organization, and you don't start to lose vital resources. You have some sort of oversight, and control is a very thankful thing. People love control. I mean, look at what is happening around us right now. In the crisis, in the Corona crisis, everybody loves control. Oh, let's do a lockdown. And if you start to think about creativity and design, and people say, no, that's dangerous.
That's also too tenuous. You need to make effort. Yeah, you need to really participate and think things through. And it's easier to say, okay, that's not allowed, and point.
Yeah. But coming back to your question, so when I meet managers or even more so leaders, so people in leadership positions, I try to remind them on the fact that actually their job is about achieving two things: design and management of an organization. I mean, a person in leadership positions are responsible for both of these things to happen. And that's actually what an organization does. An organization doesn't do more than that. On the one side, it manages everything it does, and on the other side, it designs everything it does. These are the two aspects of an organization that have to be in place, that have to be developed optimally, and ideally on the same high level. Because, everybody understands that if you run an organization and it's badly managed, Yeah, you will lose money, you will lose reliability, you will lose quality, you will lose trustworthiness and all of that. And everybody understands that, bad management, that's not good. If you have bad design, you are not relevant to customers, you're not meaningful, you cannot differentiate, you don't have a future because you have nothing that can help you to think and consider what the next step will be, because that's all what you need or what you get if you apply design on a very well level. So either, and the thing is that most leaders that I meet, they do struggle to combine both of these aspects into their doing. It's a bit of a dilemma of the either or dilemma that we have. In most of cultures around the world, and specifically today, we have this either or culture. You are either a manager or you're a designer. But if from an organization perspective, it's both. You have to be both. You have to embrace management on the same high level as design. And design, unfortunately, has been underdeveloped, as I said before, because it's much more thankful, or much more. I think it's also way easier to tend to management. It's because it's much more rewarding. Because control is much more rewarding to build in. That's also why you have reward systems in control. You think of income, margin, bonuses, and stuff like that. And I think, sometimes it reminds me of this movie. There was a movie, and it's already an old one. Maybe a lot of the listeners will remember. But there was a movie by a gangster played by David Niven, and he was a very shrewd gangster. He was very smart, and he was so smart that one side of his brain was developed that much because he was so rational thinker that his head was always tilted like this because he was this rational. And sometimes I think of CEOs. Sometimes I think of them like that. You can see them, tilting to one side. And then thinking like design, no, that's disturbing. That's a risk.
You underline the fact of balancing, that companies should balance how they act, how they operate, and what you've said is just the again bringing up the balance issue, that they should balance between the management and the design. But how do you find leaders? That's the first question that occurs to my mind, because you've been telling about the leaders and CEOs that they have had tilting. And the other one is how do you convince them that they should balance on the other side? What are your tricks to do so? How do you make them feel, okay, let's just try the other side and see if it works?
Yeah, convincing them, in the end, if you look at successful organizations, then and you start to understand, or you want to understand, what is their formula? How did they become successful? What do they do very well? To my view, and also what is generally discussed also in literature, you can see that these are companies that have this sort of balance. These are companies that are not either or. These are companies that do as well as. Well, of course, the very famous example is Apple, but also think of Tesla, think of other companies that do this. They are excellent managers and they're excellent designers both at the same time. And their leadership team is very much geared on the fact of building in this balance, of trying to achieve both. So this is what I do a lot. I say, what do you think success is all about? And then if I start to say, success is about loyal customers, for instance, that's what really success is, In order to have loyal customers, motivated loyal customers that are willing to pay an extra, willing to stay on, willing to stick to your company or to your organizations. In order to achieve that, you have to master both management and design on a very high level. And managing design having design on a high level is not only to have brilliant designers, but also to create the whole organization in a way that these great designers can be active, their work is really considered on an appropriate level, and that they are also driven and briefed and integrated in a way on a strategic level, that is making full use of their power. So I'm often using this, and also in my book I use this standard model from with this three-step model, which also has been used by the Danish Design Association years back in order to investigate how design is, best set up in an organization. And they distinguish these three levels: the operational level of design, the more procedural or technical level of design, and the strategic level of design. And the outcome of their studies, and also the studies of McKinsey and all the other organizations, actually is always the same. You have to establish design on all three levels if you want to become successful on the long run. Having great designers is not enough. You also have to have the appropriate processes, and you have to have a leadership, a strategy in place that understands why design is important, and therefore sets the right directions, the right core decisions. Building a great brand, for instance, is an absolute fundament to a successful organization. Well, building a brand you do at the core of an organization. Design only comes in terms of an agency or a branding agency way later, but then it can only become successful if it's really integrated in the strategy of an organization. Yeah. So, I was thinking a bit of an example, but where you can see it go wrong. I mean, you sometimes you discover companies that go bust. They simply give up. And here in Germany, a couple of years ago, we had this big company, a drug chain, a retailer called Schlecker. Big, 50,000 whatever employees or even more lost their jobs, and many stores, thousands of stores across Europe even had to close. And it was very clear that from a management perspective, actually there wasn't much wrong with that organization. They had a good logistics system. They were looking for the money. For many years they were very well off in financial terms. But then at a particular point, customers weren't coming into their shops anymore. And actually, because they had the merchandise, toothbrush, deodorant. I mean, what do you sell if you have a drugstore? It's just stuff that you sell, isn't it? But if you observe where it went wrong, it was all in the experience, in the customer experience, in the design, in the way that employees would deal with customers, in the way the shops were designed, in the way the whole feeling, the experience just wasn't there. And every knowledgeable business person would subscribe to the fact that customers buy experiences. They don't buy services, they don't buy products, they buy experiences. And if you want to become valuable as a business, as an organization, the better your experience is, the better off you will be. And this is described in many books, and it already started in the 90s with the experience economy written by Pine and Gilbert or whatever. Sorry, I forgot the name. But it's a very important book, the experience economy. And ever since, that's what business people understand. It's even taught at MBAs. If you want to have a successful organization, successful business, develop the experience quality of what you do. Look at Starbucks and how they, became successful, and looking exactly at that. So what do you need in order to become successful on the experience level? You need design. That's as simple as it is. Design will enable you, if you do it right, and it involves the right strategy, so the right brand, the right positioning on the market, the right differentiation over your competition or amongst your competition, the right disposition of all your employees. The employees really have to understand what do you stand for and how they have to behave and integrate and interact with customers. Then the right processes, the right lean way of working, etc. And then eventually creating those great outstanding products. A good example, for instance, which also would tell to CEOs and business doers, is when it goes wrong, where there is no success. I mean, a lot of companies fail. They don't make it. And if you observe what's really happening, then you often see that it not necessarily has to do with bad management. Like in Germany, 10 years ago, there was a big story where one of Europe's largest drugs chain stores, Schlecker, got busted and had to kind of stop his business, and 50,000 employees or 30,000, I don't know exactly, but a lot lost their job. And actually it wasn't because of their management, because they had good logistics, a lot of shops. Actually, financially, they weren't doing that bad. But then customers started to abandon their shops. They didn't come anymore, because if you would look at what was happening, their shops were dreadfully designed. They had a bad atmosphere. The experience simply wasn't there. So the customer experience is really what counts, and that's really what makes the difference, and which will engage customers to relate to your organization. So business people know this. They know that having a good customer experience is what you need to become successful. And good customer experiences, you can only design them. You cannot manage them. Management can only enable the circumstances and the enabling conditions, the resources. But the very nature of a good customer experience you have to design. In order to achieve that, you have to address these three levels that we discussed about. You have to embed it in the strategy of the organization. And you have to really make sure that the whole organization knows who they are, where they're there for, that this brand positioning is in place, that you strategically position your organization, that you can differentiate from your competitors, that you have something to stand out, and this is on a strategic level. And you have to design that. It's not something that you can just bring about by smart management. You have to really shape that.
And how do you design that?
By making aware the whole organization, what the meaning of the organization is all about. Being meaningful means that you're able to build a relationship to your customer. As I said in the beginning, the reason to be in business, that's an old Drucker quote, is to have a customer. Because whether the customer is a consumer again or a user, it doesn't really matter. But you have to become meaningful, and meaningful is a different word than becoming purposeful. Because purposeful is what is about deliver something to a customer that the customer can use. That's the purpose of your business, is to create a solution. But being meaningful is to stand out from others and to be recognized as something worthwhile or valuable, beyond what you do, beyond the products that you deliver. If you don't have that fundament that's also part of your brand, you will never become really valuable to your customers
and successful in your business.
Are
there any tools in leading design that you can recommend or say are necessary to adults start thinking about leading design?
Yeah, I think first of all, the biggest challenge I always see is to open up leaders for creativity and design in that respect, that they engage in creating meaning. So, and again, this is where a lot of managers and leaders have a skill problem. And tell that to a 50-year-old girl or boy running a company, that they have a skill problem, that they have a deficiency in being a true leader.
How do you do that?
Yeah, they won't like that. But to my experience, that's true. This is not an offense. This is just an observation that if you start to engage these people in the discussion about design, they often, focus that discussion on the work of designers and of, what is done later in the value chain. But if you say, no, I'm talking about you as a CEO or as a leader in your organization, what do you do in order to create meaning for your organization? Do you, for instance, have a personality described for your organization? Is it you? Like with Elon Musk, it would be simple. It's him. He's the personality. But what if he's leaving the company? Look at Apple. Look at, the new CEO of Apple. He's not Steve Jobs. So there is no Steve Jobs anymore.
There is a huge threat that if you leave as the face of the company, as the value for the company, then the company doesn't have any value anymore.
Yeah, and I think so far they're doing quite well at Apple because I think they have institutionalized this whole meaning thing. As they have created something, and this has partly to do with the ability of their leadership team to design, to give form, if you want to say so, to creating meaning. And there's other companies that do that as well, where that maybe don't have an outstanding super CEO that is calling the shots, and that is part of their culture, so to say. So creating a culture, which is the thing you need if you want to have leadership, is something that you have to do. And tools to do that are, of course, the ones that we also use in design. A lot of articulation, a lot of form giving. And so, for instance, if you ask a CEO, okay, can you visualize or draw the meaning of your organization? A lot of people would say, well, what do you mean? Well, we could start, for instance, with, telling a story, building a narrative. Why are we here? What is our meaning? What is our purpose? So, vision and mission. And then they say, oh, yeah, that's what you mean. Yeah, vision, mission. Yeah, we have a vision statement and a mission statement. And then you look at it and you go like, oh, but that's not differentiating. That's a bit of dry. That could be the mission statement of your competitor, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. It sounds a bit dry. Yeah, it's put on the website somewhere, hidden away. And then you have these companies that are admired. Lately I touched again on the mission statement of Patagonia, who they just make jackets. What's in making jackets? That's not something, spectacular. But they do that in a way with a mission statement and a vision that makes them quite, standing out. And that's design work for you. I mean, this is all designed. This is not managed with an Excel sheet and you say, okay, now we have a mission statement, check. No, this is a lot of culture and articulation and design work went into creating that. And this is what, even on a smaller local level, is what organizations can do. They just have to open up to this. They have to accept that also on the leadership level you have to design. You have to articulate, you have to give form to things, you have to deliberately determine how things should be and not just let them happen.
I think that a lot of people may fear to do so because it requires for them to admit they don't know certain things or they lack certain skills. And nobody likes to admit to the fact that, well, okay, maybe I haven't had that covered or maybe it's not my competence. So that brings me to the question, how do you define leaders? A good leader is, or a leader is.
Yeah, a leader is somebody that is not thinking in terms of either or, but in terms of both, as well as. I think that's what really shapes a good leader. Leaders are not persons that have a very focused and singular way of viewing the world, but have a more open way of looking at the world. So leaders are persons that embrace both design and management.
Okay. And now I will have 5 questions to you. I will start the sentence and I will ask you to continue. Okay. So this is the big 5 for the finale of our conversation. The first sentence is: design is about.
Design is about determining how things should be. So it's really about, design comes from designation. So it's about designate the world as in a better way, making, defining the world or the circumstances in a better way.
Okay. And the second sentence is, I want my students to
open up for as well as thinking. So, and not an either or thinking. I want my students to be holistic persons and to embrace the world holistically.
It is just opens my mind that you think so broadly that it's not being holistic and designate. There are such big things. I mean, you need to open up to so many aspects, and you have to be open to the fact that you don't know, that this is in the world that is today, that makes you think in being a profession or a professional in one area. Being holistic is like, telling to a clown that he needs to be a philosopher. I mean, it's just hard, but it's so needed, it's so I'm just amazed with what you are saying.
The thing is that to quickly react on that question on education, yes, of course, people need a profession. They need a core skill. It's great if you know that you are a hammer, a screwdriver, or a saw, just to name something. But it's important that you know what the hammer and the saw and the screwdriver will accomplish. Because, your core skill is just a mean to an end. It's great if you can participate in an organization and doing a particular job. But if you're not able to understand what the meaning of that organization is and what the purpose of the organization is, you become just a robot. So I think this model is called T-shaped model, where you develop in your profession, in your education, you develop your core skill. You become a hammer. But you also should develop so-called lateral skills or interdisciplinary skills, whatever you want to call them, that will develop you to become a human person and not a robot. And I think this is, I'm very fearful for what's happening currently, because we are rapidly going into a robot world where all people are educated to become better robots or better than robots. And also we treat our problems like if it was to be treated like a robot, and that's not the case. It's always as well as.
Okay, so let's move on. 2020 has allowed me to
treat my dog better, because I've been traveling a lot, and my dog, was always very. She was sad, me seeing me leaving, and now I've been home for almost whole the year, and I think that was very good to my dog. Beyond that, I think it allowed me also to again reconfirm myself that we have a big issue in what I just described before, in people seeking for solutions only from a management perspective. People are losing the ability to become creative and allow creativity to be part of a solution.
Yeah, this is what we've been discussing before we started recording. How the pandemic is being handled, and you said that the control is the tool that allows us to control the pandemic instead of thinking of creative solutions to how we can handle this. And and I will just slightly go deeper. What are you looking for in 2021?
I think, like most of us, we are hoping that this whole thing will end. A lot of people say there will be a new normal. Well, I would be looking for something totally else. For me, we need a totally new, a restart from a different sort, not the restart that a lot of people would like to have, which is a robot world. I would be looking for a human world. So a world where we do understand that we need to manage, yes, we need to take care of ourselves, we need to secure, we need control to a certain degree, But on an equal level, we need freedom, we need creativity, we need openness, we need risk-taking. Because if you don't take risks, and this is what every entrepreneur will tell you. I spoke to an entrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a bit scary guy. But I understand that much, that every entrepreneur that says, there are two skills that I really require to set up a good business. One is, of course, to be able to look after things, of course, resources and stuff in place. And secondly, to be open to risks, to be creative, to be willing to fail. And nowadays, I feel that society and politicians and also a lot of business doers, as a consequence of that, are avoiding risks and avoiding creativity and avoiding failure. Yeah? And that is something that I'm not looking for in 2021. I want people to open up again for mistakes.
Yeah, and I have such reflection that the innovation stops when you stop being creative.
Of course, yeah, of course. If you control, you are freezing the status quo. You want things to be as they were, and you are stopping any new things to emerge. Yeah.
Oh, let's hope that this will not happen into 2021. Yeah. I'm having problems with those dates, I'm just like stuck in the middle 2000. Two last questions. The word successful is about
having a recognition from your customer. That's for me success.
And let's step aside from the business side, and let's think of like globally in life, being successful is.
Yeah, well, that you have the feeling that you're doing something meaningful, so that there's meaning to what you do, and that only comes when in reflection, of course. I mean, even if you're on your own, which sometimes I think would be great, isn't it, if we could be like that, especially in these days. But even if you would be on your own and you do something, you need reflection, isn't it? Because otherwise you just exist, you vegetate. So being meaningful means that somebody around you says, hey, yeah, I get it, great what you're doing. And then you get this kind of reward and or feedback or reflection that you say, yeah, it's meaningful what I do. Even if it's humble, if I'm just cleaning the street or, picking up garbage or educating children or doing something which is not, in the news or is not like, I don't get $1 million per month, for kicking a leather ball, but still it's meaningful. And for that, you need the reflection of your people. And I think that's success.
Okay. And the last question, the most important thing in life is?
To have meaning.
Yeah, I figured that. Halfway through your answer to the last before that question. Yeah, it does make sense to be meaningful and to have that reflection that what you do is balanced and has value for you and for someone else, and that someone else can, stand in front of you and say, hey, thank you, it's good to have you. Yeah.
Isn't that, that's what people love, if you run a little bookstore. My wife runs a bookstore, and these days are hard because now she has to close it down again, and this just before Christmas, it's terrible. But when she comes home and she tells me about a customer, she has a couple of these customers that keep coming back to her store. And running a bookstore these days, against Amazon, and so it's kind of tough. But she has something that Amazon will never have. She has these customers that come in and say, oh, actually, I cannot really buy something today because, I have everything I need right now, but I just wanted to say hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the value you will never get being an Amazon.
Then you have meaning. That becomes very meaningful. And not discrediting Amazon. Amazon is doing a great job in what they do. But, so even on smaller scale, not so super large, Tesla, whatever, scale, Apple scale, there are a lot of small companies that we don't even know that do a marvelous job and are a leading example of what it means to balance management and design in the right way. and to sustain and then still be meaningful for customers and for their employees. And if you want to do that, I think this I'm convinced you have to design on all aspects of your organization, not only on the interior design or on the logo of your that sticks on your front door.
Or the office of the CEO, yeah?
Yeah, or the office of the CEO, yeah.
You have to design the total thing, all the 3 levels. Yeah.
Jan-Erik, thank you for your conversation today. Let's hope that we'll all get some balance in upcoming 2021.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Agatha, and all the best.
You are listening to the Futures Thinking podcast, where futures meet present, powered by Green Hat Innovation and 360inspiration.nl.